This month is really special for me. Richard Kaminski is had quite a life. He was one of 5 children. He was known as coming from the greatest generation. He was the youngest of Joseph and Joanne Kaminski. And here's where it gets real personal for me, not just that. One of Dick's brothers was Victor Kaminski. He was my father. Uncle Dick, as I got to know him, has been my mentor, my uncle, and father figure as well. Back in 1973, Dick came over to deliver the message that my father had passed away suddenly, and at that point, Uncle Dick and Aunt Mary were always there for me to help me, guide me along. So, been very special all my life, and I appreciated having him here. Let's get into Dick's bio real quick. Dick Kaminski served as a B-17 waist gunner, was drafted in August of 1943 at the age of 20.
19.
19.
About a week before 20.
Who wrote this? He subsequently transferred to the Air Corps in October of 43, where he started cadet school. The program closed in April of 44. He was assigned to Gunnery School in Tampa. For crew assembly, then went to Camp Kilmer in New Jersey for transport to England. Upon arriving in Callahan, England, he was assigned to the 457th Bomb Group, where Richard flew 15 combat missions. His longest mission was over 10 hours to Bowl.
Swine Monday.
All right. And the shortest, about 6 hours to Hopsten, Germany. He returned to the U.S. in May of 45, was assigned as a truck driver in Albuquerque. He was honorably discharged in November of 45 in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Richard is the past president of the Minnesota chapter of the Aviation Hall of Fame, and I'd like to welcome him here and everyone, and please give him a round of applause and welcome.
You didn't introduce Greg.
I'll introduce, whoops.
We don't need him.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. I'm Greg Kaminski, that's my father. What Steve said is sort of interesting. Talked about a father figure and stuff for him. He literally lived across the alley from me growing up. So, yeah, he was a father figure. Since you pretty much covered everything, we're going to be pretty brief. I interviewed Dad about a month ago, and we went through and we wrote some stuff down that we wanted to cover. Dad was there at the end of the war, the last few months of the war. He actually arrived in England in January of 45. So things were different than earlier on, and we sort of wanted to cover things that people don't hear a lot about, and his experiences therein. His training that he went through, just what it was like to be there at that time. And it's first-person information, as best a memory as what we have. And I would ask that if anybody has any questions, we thought it'd be a good idea, just shout them out right away. Because if we hold them to the end, we're going to forget them, and then we won't get those other interesting little stories out. We'll see if this works. Hey. Couple things. Dad, you want to talk about what you were doing before the war?
Before the war, I was working with Munsingware. So was Mary over there. And I was an electrician helper. So I left school early and started working there.
And then you had something called a draft.
Yes, unfortunately, the president sent me a greeting. And I wasn't happy about that, but you went. So
I have here his draft registration certificate and his notice of classification. So I don't know how many of you guys still have your draft cards.
Burn 'em.
I was thinking mine was in an ashtray somewhere. I'm not really sure. But if you want to see these afterward, I'll have them up here. I'm afraid if I pass them around, they might disappear. All right, so you were drafted, and what happened when you were drafted? Where did you go?
What do you mean when I went in?
Right.
I went to Fort Snelling. That was the induction center. And went through a physical. And got shots. And being at that age, never heard of a shot before, so I proceeded to pass out. When I woke up, they were putting shoes on my feet. So, but it all worked out all right.
That's the little physical picture down here. You were only there for a few days, correct?
Yeah, it wasn't very long. About a week, I think I was there.
And you stayed overnight there?
No, always went home.
Now, your mother, my grandmother, thought maybe you were a little inexperienced in life.
Oh, yeah. So she had my sister and her husband take me to the bar and feed me some drinks. So I knew what it was like. Well, that was a good experience. And really, I don't know how much it helped, but we did it.
Okay, so you were at Fort Snelling, and you weren't really in the Army, you weren't really in the Navy yet.
No, when that was, then they put you in this big room. That was when I first went out. And the guy come out from the Navy and wanted me to draft me into the Navy. I says, I don't want to go into the Navy. I want to go into the Army Air Force. I got 2 brothers in the Army, and I think I better stay in the Army. He says, okay. So that's where I was drafted into the Army. Okay. Then I took the train. That was actually my first train ride to Fort Knox, Kentucky, the Armored Force.
Okay, talk about the train ride, where'd you go?
Through Chicago and down to Kentucky.
You said you went into the train station in Chicago.
Oh yeah, that was a big deal. They had models all over the whole auditorium there. It was great. That was really something for me to see.
And then, as you were driving along, they always let the regular passenger trains go through, and you pulled off.
Pulled off and stopped. It took us, I don't know, about 4 days, I think, to get from Minneapolis to Kentucky. So, and we stopped and ate at, what the heck's his name? They had all the eating places. Huh?
Kentucky
Yeah.
Fried Chicken.
I don't know, Johnson. Howard Johnson, that's it. He had places all over the country.
So you're in Fort Knox, and what did you do there? I mean, that was your basic.
That was
training.
basic military training mostly. We did some driving trucks, and I drove, or not drove, I was riding in that one tank. It was an M8. And after riding in that, I decided that isn't the place for me. I don't think I want to get stuck in there. So I applied for transfer to the Air Corps. And I had to go off base into Louisville and have my physical all over again. And then they give you what's called a written test. And I passed all of it, and they gave me the transfer.
Yeah, I was reading about that, and they were complaining that they took all the higher intelligent people and put them in the Air Force. So then the Army, the ground troops were complaining that they had the lower, because you had to be at a certain level in order to get into the Air Force. Before we go into that part of it, can you talk more about the training, the guns that you trained on?
Oh, the guns. We were training with the old Springfield. That was a beautiful rifle, that Springfield. And the old Enfield, that weighed a ton, and that was a heavy old big. And that's about the only two that we really.
You had mentioned that you had tossed a couple grenades there also.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. Throwing them damn things and ducking down in the ditch. Crawling under the barbed wire while they're shooting a machine gun over your head. And then jump in a foxhole and have a tank run over you. That was fun.
They had a Jeep road course?
Yeah, we rode the Jeep and drove that around for a while. They have a track that you can ride around in. And we take that Jeep in all the mud holes and everything else, trying to get it stuck. We never did. That was a good little outfit.
Target shooting.
Yes, we did that.
You did a Kaminski thing called cheating.
Never.
Pull the target down, put your finger in the hole.
Well, that was for somebody else that was shooting.
Yeah.
If they missed the target, we'd poke a hole in it.
Everybody passed. You're friends with the mess sergeant. You said the food there was
terrible. It was amazing, but I did a lot of KP there. For some reason, I never did figure that out.
You also broke a rule. You went into town with the mess sergeant?
With the mess sergeant, yeah, AWOL. But we went to the bar and had a few drinks.
So the home training came in handy.
Oh, yeah.
Entertainment there, on base. You said pool, beer?
Oh, yeah, we got a swimming pool, that's about it.
Yeah.
So,
anyways, you transferred to the Air Force after you took that test. You were out on a bivouac,
that was still in the Armored Force.
right?
And we were out on a bivouac for 2 weeks, living in a tent, two guys in a thing about that high. And that wasn't a lot of fun either. But they come and told me I got transferred to the Air Force. So I went back to the main post and changed clothes and went over to the Air Force.
Yeah, so there was an Air Force base there, and you saw your first B-17.
Yeah, that B-17 came in. We all ran over to look at it. Boy, that was a monster. And yeah, we were happy then. That was like night and day when you transferred from that armored infantry to the Air Force. And the food was great, and we didn't do anything.
All right, so you waited at Fort Knox, and finally you got sent to St. Louis.
Yes, that was, we had to take basic all over again. We took basic with the Air Force. And that was all right, because it wasn't that difficult with it. They didn't flush around in the mud and all that good stuff.
You said you did a psychomotive test for 3 days?
Yes, that was enough to drive you crazy. But I got by it, it was okay.
What was that? What did
It
you?
was a test to see all your reflexes and everything else that you, and what you could do and what you couldn't do.
You had to line up some sticks.
Yes, that was for depth perception. You had to do that.
Written tests, geography, math, general
Yes,
knowledge.
That was, the written test lasted 2 days. They really drained you dry. So,
You said there was a mock-up cockpit with
Yes. that
motors
was,
and a clicker.
yeah, it would flop from one side to the other, and you controlled it with your feet, like a rudder. And you had to keep it up on balance. Otherwise, if you fell down, it would click and count the number of times it was down. Well, I thought it was so easy, I got it up there and it sat there, and no problem at all. These other guys are flopping back and forth. So towards the end, I figured, yeah, maybe something wrong with this. I let it go down, and then I brought it back up again. So that was easy.
You went into town about 3 times a week. And you saw Uncle Vince for the last time there.
That was when I was in St. Louis,
Oh, that was
yeah.
St. Louis. When we
Yeah,
moved down
that's
there.
right. That's where you're
Yeah,
at.
we're at St. Louis.
Yes, we went into town and we went to the USO to see what they had that we could do. And they had tickets to the Russian Cossack Choir. We had, when we were home, my brother was a record nut, and he had records of this group. So we decided that we'd go and listen to it. And during the intermission, I walked out to the lobby. And there, standing at the bar, is my brother. I never knew he was any place near there. And so we spent almost all night talking.
I don't know if you can see that at all.
And
But that's Uncle Vince.
Vince. It was really something. That was the last time I saw him. Go ahead. And we'll go into that a little later.
Okay,
You lost?
I did. Okay, now, this is where you said you became a cadet here.
Yes. I was shipped to Springfield, Missouri. You have to go through college for cadets. And that was about 4 months, I think. And yeah, that's it. That was the best time that I had in the service. It was really great. The food was just amazing. You couldn't beat it. We had the weekends off to ourselves. We could go out and join the girls.
When you first arrived on the base, you got harassed a little bit.
Oh, yeah. We took the train down there, and they had to make it look like the old style cadets where they give you this business about, hurry up and all that crap. But the next day it was all gone, and they were all just fine.
So this was training, it was all classroom.
All classroom, it was almost a standard college course. We started out with just an addition and a subtraction, and went up through calculus in 3 months. And you had to grasp it all. That was tough. And then you had physics and history, geography, everything.
And you had an intro in the flight,
What?
intro into flight in the Cub-typed aircraft.
Oh, yeah. In the last part of the college, they give us flying lessons in, I don't know if it was Cubs or L5s or whatever it was. But we were flying those things. And that was great. We had a good time. So, That was the first time I'd ever been in an airplane.
And then you were like 3 weeks to graduate.
Yeah. And they said that anybody that had transferred from some other outfit to the Air Force had to go back to their old unit. Well, it so happened I wasn't assigned to any unit, so I didn't have to go back. But I did have to leave the cadets, and they sent me to gunnery school, which was Kingman, Arizona.
Here's, whoops. You can see this afterward too. Here's Dad's cadet picture when he was a cadet. So, yep. Okay, I think Uncle Vince was getting ready to leave when you met him there.
Yes, he went to, I think Hunter Field, Georgia, and then up to Newfoundland, and he was flying a 17, and he flew across to England. So,
I have his diary, and this was the diary that he kept before he went over. I don't know if he kept another one when he got there.
I haven't seen it, I don't know.
But I just want to read the last entry in here, which was October 6th of 43. I'm leaving for combat duty tomorrow. I wonder when or if I'll ever return. Wish I could get home one more time. And he did not.
He was shot down and killed on his 27th mission. He had volunteered for this last mission. So, very unfortunate.
You can talk about his ring now then too.
Huh? Oh, well, he was shot down. They were going to bury him over there by the churchyard. And the co-pilot had bailed out, and he was alive, and he was standing there watching them bury these other guys that were in the airplane. One of the workers that were burying them slipped my brother's ring off him. He has a ring. I was going to bring it, and I forgot. And handed it to the co-pilot. The co-pilot kept it all during the war, and after the war given it to my mother. And I now have that ring. And so, very emotional.
Do you know I have the other ring?
What?
My dad had the other ring.
Yeah.
Tiger's eye ring, right?
Yes. So,
All right, after the program closed, you had to go somewhere else.
yeah. Kingman, Arizona. Most beautiful spot if you don't like it. It was terrible. And it was in the, mostly in the summer. So it was hot, 115 on the ramp.
Ooh.
So, but that was gunnery school.
And I had the movie on here as you all were walking in here, having to do with gunnery school and what went on there. Do you want to talk about your training there?
Yeah, most of it was shooting. They're on the back end of a pickup truck going around the track, and they were throwing pigeons out. We had shotguns, and they would throw the pigeons out, and you're supposed to hit it. Well, boy, that's really something, because you're going one way and they're going the other. So it was tough. If you hit one, boy, that was a good thing.
Did you ever do any shooting out of the turrets?
Yes. We had turrets. I don't know, it doesn't show any there.
There's
They
some-
weren't like that. They were mounted. And they had the computing site in there. And the tower was way up. Showing the pitching out there. And with that computer in sight, you hardly ever missed. It was just amazing. But we had to go up and run throwing the pigeons out. Every once in a while, we'd knock the center out of the pigeon. The poor guy in that turret, he didn't stand a chance.
Cheating.
Yeah.
You had a cubbyhole malfunction area where you went to shoot a gun. It would malfunction. You had to figure out what was wrong with it.
Then you had to find the problem and repair it and shoot it.
You took a flight in the B-17,
The first flight.
through the one of our nation's, what would you call it? Treasures.
That first flight, I hate to tell you what they call it. They call it the puke ride. One guy got sick, boy, the whole airplane was sick. And then when you get back, you have to clean it up. So.
Yeah, you said you had flown through the Grand Canyon.
Oh yeah, we went, that was different. That was on a gunnery mission. That wasn't the first flight. And the pilot decided he wanted to go down through the canyon, so he did, went down through in the Grand Canyon. So we got to see it.
Yeah, roll the video. One time you went to town, big night.
Yeah, the town is about 2 blocks long. And that's about all it was. We turned around and went back to base.
And this is where you became a private first class?
Yep. When you graduated, you come out of there in the wings in first class.
There you go. Next you went to, I don't know if I got one here for that or not. Yep, Plant Park, Florida.
Plant Park.
Yep, for a crew forming.
Yes.
Talk about
We
that.
were there a couple of weeks, well, about a month. And we didn't do anything, just waiting to form up into a cruise. And we ended up, and that's our crew. And guess who's in the middle? Anyway, the bombardier, we didn't fly much with him. They had their own bombardier out there when we got over in England. So. But the rest of the guys all stuck together pretty much.
So you were there, all in a big room with a bunch of people, and then what happened? How did they form that crew?
But mostly by initials. First, last initials are K's. So they'd say, you know, the radio operators wherever they were at the time, and gunners, and same way with the pilot, co-pilot, navigator. They just went down in the alphabetical order.
So that was the first time you met your crew?
Oh yeah, that was it.
Then from there you headed to MacDill for crew training.
Crew training, right. And that was interesting. We had a good deal going for us. The food was great. We'd walk into the mess hall and they ask you, how do you want your steak? You know, then that's got to be pretty good for an army. So we ate good.
There was a saying there though, in Tampa Bay. What was that?
One a day in Tampa Bay. Well, we did lose quite a few. We were off on searches for one of them, I remember. We never did find it. But we also, we flew a training mission, and somehow or other the one engine started losing oil, and it lost all the oil, and it didn't have the reserve portion in the tank, and the prop started windmilling. Here we are over the Everglades, and the pilot pushes a bailout button. And we called him, and I says, "Are you going out?" He says, "No, I'm going to stay for a while." I said, "So are we." But we were lucky. We looked down, and there was a smaller airport that was flying just the small L5s and stuff. And we got in there. And when we got out, you could take the prop and just spin it with your hand almost, and it sheared everything. So it was about ready to come off.
And you also saw somebody step out of the 17?
Oh, boy. That was when we were just ready to take off from McDill. And we were still parked on our revetment. And the guy next to us had his 4 engines running, ready to taxi. Somebody drove up with a Jeep and said, "We got a message for the pilot, we'd like to talk to him." The pilot dropped, I can't see where's that airplane? There's a hatch right on the nose that the pilot usually drops out. And he dropped out of there and walked right through the prop that was running. And he was right next to us. But we got out of there right away. There's nice hanging around there. That was bad.
You had a visit from family?
Yes, my mother and my aunt came down to visit. We also, the pilot's family came down, and he owned a McGuire's chop house in New York, right on Broadway. So they were pretty well heeled. And he brought us each a 6-foot white scarf. So we were big shots then.
Okay, once you've finished your crew training, you're ready to head overseas.
Yep.
So you headed to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey.
Yes.
And actually, you were supposed to go to Georgia first.
Yes, we were supposed to go to Georgia, pick up an airplane, and fly overseas, but there was no airplanes available, so they sent us to Kilmer. And we waited there and then took the train over to the port, climbed aboard the Aquitania, which is a sister ship to the Lusitania. It was a big honker. We went by ourselves. We didn't go in convoy. But it was twisting and turning all the way over there. And it took 5 days to get there. But that wasn't too bad, really.
You and I. There are a couple of stories from on the ship on the way over. First of all, you weren't with the officers.
No, they had the staterooms upstairs. We were down at the bottom. Our bunks were 3 high. Unfortunately, I was on the bottom. But if you bumped your head, you'd be bumping into the guy above you. They really put them in there.
Now, you told me this last week, I never heard this before, but as the stuff moved around there, you were by the boat.
I was by the side of the ship. The ocean was pretty rough, so it was weaving back and forth. And everybody seemed to store their candy bars and stuff on the floor. Because I woke up in the morning and reached down and on the side, and all those candy bars, boy, I really made out.
You want to talk about the lavatories there too, and the long seat
Oh, that's naughty.
Who wants to hear the lavatory story?
It was a long chute, and you had to sit down on it, and somebody pooped on it, and the ship rocked, you had to raise up.
He said it was kind of like a, I don't know what, a pipe organ or something. Everybody along the line would get up as this wave came down.
That's why we call it the wave at the,
Okay, I might mention that the Aquitania was one of the last of the 4 stacker cruise ships that that England had made, along with, you can remember here, the Mauritania and the Lusitania. So they used that up until World War II. They used it in World War I as a transport also. And then they used it in World War II, and then after World War II, it sort of stayed in the military. So this is just after the war. I think they repainted the stacks back to the normal colors, but that's the battle gray that it had during the war. And it was about 1950 or so, I believe, that they scrapped it. You landed in Scotland.
In Scotland, right.
Went to a distribution center and
Yes.
then a train.
And that's where we learned how to use the English money. And you know, you go shopping with it, and you learn in a hurry what to do with that money. But yeah, we did.
Train to Peterborough and then on to Glatton.
Glad,
And this was in January.
yes.
Just so happened that the 401st was about 5 miles away from the Glatton base.
That 401st was my brother's base. He was the 401st and the 457th and one other one flew in formation together. So when I had a free day, I went over to see where my brother was. He was down before I got there. And I talked to some of the guys that knew him, and I guess he was pretty well liked, but unfortunately that doesn't help.
So we got to Glatton Air Base. And this was pretty much a standard air base that the English had built. And I'll show, I got a pointer. Whoops, that's good. That area right there is where the 750th Squadron's huts were. That's where Dad lived. And this area over here is where the aircraft for the 750th were parked. Just to give you an idea.
And the mess hall was just, that was the most
The
important
mess
thing
hall.
on the day.
Right here.
common denominator.
Yeah, common denominator. Talk about the base a little bit. Here's some pictures.
Yeah, that's the tower, right? The first one there is.
That again is a standard tower they had at many of the air bases.
And then the Nesson huts, it's not a Quonset hut, it's a little different than a Quonset hut. But they were serviceable.
You had what? How many crew in there?
2. There were 20 guys in that. 10 from, well, it wasn't, that isn't true. There was only,
10.
no,
Well, it would be the
enlisted people.
enlisted.
Yeah,
So it'd be either 4 or 5.
5, yeah, about 10.
About 10. And in the middle was the stove.
The stove, the guys used to take those, what do they call those little tubes?
Oh, like a CO2.
CO2 out of the May West
Oh, May West, yeah.
and throw them in the stove when it was hot, and boy, it would blow up to be They told us, if you blow up one more stove, you're gonna freeze because we ain't gonna give you another one. We blew up about 4 of them. So they throw it in there and everybody runs for the door.
This right here is one of the only structures left on the airfield anymore. That's the water tower, or one of the water towers. They still use one runway as just a regular airport there. I found this picture. Yes,
How many aircraft were on the airfield at the time?
you want to start another argument, don't you? Go ahead, Dad.
What?
How many aircraft were there total on the field?
On the field, oh boy. I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't been able to figure it out yet. Here,
Each squadron would put up, what, about 5, 6?
yeah, this is a chart of. I found it interesting. Here are the 4 squadrons in the 457th, and these are the aircraft lined up here in each one. Okay, and then here are the pilots lined up. And so we had an argument about this, of course. And there's quite a few more pilots than aircraft, as you can see. I thought it was interesting. At any rate, if you look up here, here's McGuire, so that'd be Dad's pilot. And on the original, you can just barely make out the serial number of the aircraft, but you can't read what the status of it is over here. Here's remarks. Waiting transfer. There's some of them that are 1, 2, 3, and 4 engine change. They got some work to do here. So, anyway, I don't know the answer to that. I've been trying to figure it out, and I just haven't been able to do it.
We got a new, brand new airplane was assigned to us. That was the chop house. There it is right there. And we weren't the only ones that ever flew that airplane. If we were fly one day, they might have another crew fly it the next day, and we'd stay down. So that's why you see more bombers on there than...
It was like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, however many missions the plane went on. The plane also arrived at Glatton around January, I believe. I think I got a slide up ahead. So it arrived at about the same time.
Like I mentioned to start with, the McGuire's Chop House was a restaurant on Broadway. So that's why we painted the Biffy on the airplane. But they were happy with it, so it was a beautiful airplane. I've never seen one made up like this one was. I had a armor plate. Where's the airplane?
Behind you.
Below the waist cutter, from the waist cutter down to the catwalk, was all armor plate. And that was the first model that ever had any armor plate in the waist. So the first mission we flew was with the Flak Dodger. And that one,
That's Flak Dodger there.
that one didn't have nothing. In fact, you said that's Flak Dodger?
Yep. 075.
I thought that had the window open.
No, that's it.
Anyway, the early E's and F's had a wide open window there. There was nothing. And they were standing right in the breeze, and it's about 50, 60 below up there. So it was cold.
Let's talk about a typical mission that you went on.
Well, the first, to start with, you're sleeping fine, but till the guy comes in the door and flips on the light and says, McGuire's crew, you're flying today. So that made everybody happy. But that was about 4:30 in the morning. So we'd get up and get dressed, and we went over to see the priest first, and then we went to chow, and
Breakfast was?
breakfast was usually powdered eggs And then we'd make toast in the stove, put a piece of bread on the end of a fork and hold it in the fire, make toast. But it was okay. Once in a while we'd have fresh eggs. Boy, and everybody was up for breakfast. But from there, then we went to, we got the
Yeah, I do.
briefing.
No. That's your, we got your,
Well, we didn't get that yet. We get to go to briefing first.
I don't think I have one.
Huh?
I don't have a briefing.
Well, anyway, we'd go to briefing, and there we'd find out where the target was for the day, and you'd find out what altitude and all that good stuff. So, and how many guns are in range, and that didn't make anybody happy either. Okay,
And then you went to the,
and then we'd go into this outfit like this. Each guy had a cubby hole with all his equipment in it, with the parachute and the flak suit, May West, and we'd haul that out and take it out and get ready to go over to the ship.
took a truck over to the ship.
Right. And we always carried a spare of almost everything, spare chute and a spare flak suit, heated suit. And because those heated suits were good, they did the job, they did a nice job. But they didn't always work.
You had
So-
heated gloves too.
Well, heated gloves, heated boots. So it was okay as long as they worked. And you could dial in the temperature you wanted.
Now, let me get the next one. Okay, so you were sitting there waiting at the plane.
Yep, and we'd wait for the tower to shoot off either a red flare or a green flare. The red flare means it's scrubbed, you go back home. Green flare, climb in the plane and get ready to go. So,
You guys would take off and have to climb out and somehow form up into a
right.
group.
We, each group, like the 457, had a area that they could circle in until they get formed up. And you better stay in there because you, just a short ways away is another outfits are doing the same thing. And they were all over England at the same time.
Yeah, I still can't, I'm trying to figure it out, how they can do this, and this, all these different groups forming up. Somehow they all get in a line and head out in order. It's amazing, and if you think about it, some of those big bombing raids had 1,000 planes in them headed out. They didn't all go to the same target, but they're all headed in the same pretty much general direction, or two general directions.
Well, not the same target, but when we hit Berlin, usually they were all hitting Berlin. And we led the whole 8th Air Force into Berlin one flight. Turned around and come back along the bomber stream. And we were almost back to base and they were still taking off waiting to go and bomb Berlin. So it was amazing. I don't know. You'd think they'd bombed it right off of the planet.
Yeah, I saw some pictures that I didn't include in here of some bombed German cities, and we were looking at them the other day, and they're just shells of buildings left.
Yeah.
As far as you can see in that photo, I mean, it was, the devastation was
We also bombed, blew up a lot of farmers' gardens, I think.
Talk about Flak, and your friendly flag gunner on the coast.
Flak, there was one guy on the Zeider Z, and it seems like every place we went, we had to go over him, but give him a shot. And he was pretty accurate with that damn thing. But our first flight was, he was out there about a couple of blocks behind us. The next one was maybe 2 blocks behind us. The next one was 1 block behind us. If he would have shot one more, he would have hit us, but we were out of range. So we were real fortunate.
Yeah, so explain what flak is.
Hmm?
Tell everybody what flak is.
Well, flak is an exploding shell, and all these pieces are flying out. If they blow you, everything blows up. If it blows above you, you don't have to worry about it because it's going up. But we were lucky. We didn't have a whole lot of trouble. They blew, our deputy lead caught one right in the nose and blew up right in the nose of the airplane. And he was, the bombardier and the navigator were gone. And then the airplane went down.
When you went over there toward the end of the war, there wasn't really a lot left for the German Air Force.
No, we were real fortunate. They were pretty well shot down by the 50. The 51 really took care of the German Air Force. They, not only were they a good airplane, that 51, but also there were so damn many of them. They had outnumbered the German Air Force, just overwhelmed them, and practically knocked them out of the sky.
You did see a couple of jets, though.
Oh yeah, there was, if they would have gotten that 262 in the air 2 or 3 months earlier, we'd have been in deep doo-doo, boy. That airplane was something that you couldn't touch it.
Now, we talked about different bomb loads that you carried, 100, 500, 1,000.
1,000, that's about it.
And then chaff.
Chaff. One mission we flew, we carried nothing but chaff. And I don't know, you know what chaff is, you know what tinsel is for a Christmas tree. Well, that's what chaff is. And what it does is reflects the radar so that it screws it all up. Well, we had a whole 3 airplanes with nothing but a whole bomb bay full of chaff. And it was in little packages in a carton. And we opened it up and dropped the whole works, and it breaks apart and scatters all over. So it really does a job for radar.
And then you also said you had something like napalm.
Oh yeah, we carried a Bombay tank full of napalm, and that is scary stuff. If you puncture that and it gets into the air, it bursts into flames just from hitting the air. And that is really bad stuff. We were happy to see that get out of there.
Okay, on the way back after you bombed, you said that there never really ran into any flak on the way back.
No, they were too busy shooting at all those other airplanes.
So you took the flak suit off, and
Yeah, more or less.
and once you were deputy and you had taken pictures that they wanted back.
Yeah. Deputy lead, and they wanted the pictures back in a hurry. So we left the formation and hurried back.
And a P-47 came in?
Yeah, they were escorted us partway back. So, yeah.
White Cliffs of Dover come into view?
Oh, yeah. I was happy to see that. They're nice to see. Joe, you must have seen them.
You get back, a red flare means?
Wounded on board. And the engineer had the flare gun. And if you had a wounded on board, you stick the flare gun up and fire the red flare. Then they'd be waiting, the ambulance would be following you down and pick up the wounded right away. So,
You guys never had a wounded on your own?
no, thank goodness.
I have one mission that we wanted to talk about. I learned how to use this. It was April 15th, way toward the end of the war, and you flew a mission over France.
That was that Royan you're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah. We took off, flew over to France on our own without flying information, and then dropped down and circled around the Eiffel Tower.
Oh.
And if those Frenchmen knew we had a full bomb loaded there, they wouldn't have been very happy, I'm sure. But we got to see the tower.
What they did then is they circled and circled and circled, and they were bombing a very small area, a little pocket of
In Royan,
resistance.
yeah.
Yep. And they only went in with like 3 aircraft at a time.
Right. And we would circle outside until they called us in, and the 3 airplanes go in, drop their bombs, and head for home, and the rest still circling and waiting for their call. So it was not a couple of days later, those people all surrendered.
This is the mission narrative that I dug out. A successful mission, apparently. You had some off time when you were at Glatton. Flew to Ireland?
Yes. Our pilot's grandparents lived in Ireland, and we had an airplane that did slow time. Slow time means you couldn't put a load on the engine, and you had to just let it kind of idle. So we took that airplane and flew it over to Ireland, landed. He went to see his grandparents, and we went to the bar. We were going to bring back some Irish whiskey. First thing the bartender says, "Where's your bottle?" He had a keg up behind there. The only way to fill it is hand him the bottle, he'd fill it up. But we didn't get any. Of course, we had a drink while we were there, but
Another time you went to the repo center?
yeah, that was another one. And the pilot and co-pilot decided we should have a lunch together. Well, we can't go into the officers' mess. You can't go into our mess. The pilot said, "Here, take this and put that on." And he gave me his bar, and the co-pilot gave it to the other guy. So we went in and had the officers' mess and had lunch. Then when we were coming out, all the officers have to sign their register, and there's a guy standing there. So the only thing we could do is go up and fake writing. But we made it. We had a good time. The thing is, the only thing they could do is make you quit flying, you know? What do you need? Oh, have any of you guys ever seen a short snorter? Or know what a short snorter is? No. There he is. Here's one I had over in England. And if you go into a bar and you haven't got a short snorter with you and you can show it, then you buy a drink for everybody, for all the guys.
Oh, wow.
And then they have to sign it. So this happens to be a 10 shilling note from England. So
I did find a few more pictures here. This plane here with the W on the tail, that's McGuire's Chop House. Right here is a radar.
oh yeah, that was another thing. they took our airplane, took out the ball turret. That's that little thing underneath there. And in fact, this airplane here has got a radar dome in it. And they put a radar dome, and the radar unit itself is up in the radio room, right in the middle of the airplane. And right there, that window, yeah, that's the radio room. And he could bomb with that. And that's what he was, anyway. And so we lost the ball turret. And, I wasn't too happy about that because then you have no protection for underneath.
Here's another picture. It's the same two aircraft. I suspect it's from the same mission, because here's that radar again. And you'll note that the ball turret on Chop House is facing straight down.
Yeah, they haven't changed it yet. In fact, when the guns are straight down like that, that guy isn't in there.
Right.
Because he puts the gun straight down and unlatches his latch behind him and stands up, and he's up in the airplane. So he can climb out of there real quick.
And here's one last picture, same group. And this one over here would be Chop House. There's Dad's window right there. Say hi.
That, on the 17, right there at that window is the only place on the airplane that a guy has to stand the whole mission. That's what they tell you. You don't do it. But it is tough. There's no place to sit really. You sit on the floor. And, but all the rest have a seat of some kind.
Do you think you get used to one side or the other?
Pardon me?
You always shoot from the port side or from the starboard side?
Yeah, you can't fly. If you're flying like this, you always fly to the outside. Otherwise, an airplane is in the air, you're going to shoot down that airplane. So you never shoot to the inside.
What was that?
Was there two gunners, two waist gunners, just one?
What was that?
Two gunners or one?
They had two, but they went to one because that guy couldn't shoot out that side anyway. And if we got out by ourselves, the radio operator could come back and take over a gun.
Dad always talked about when he was watching the movies well, they're not in a tight enough formation. Move it together.
Yeah.
So I found a picture, and I think it more or less accurately shows the way they flew. They didn't want to have the fighters necessarily going between them. So, yeah, they're pretty close.
No, you fly as tight as you can because if they break formation, they'll come down and go right through the formation. Take out a couple of them. So
Okay, so your mission is over. It lasted how long?
the longest it had was 10 hours. And we were on fumes when we got back. There wasn't much gas left.
And what did you have to eat in the 10 hours?
Nothing.
It's
I took an orange up there one time and it was like eating a popsicle.
minus 50 degrees.
Yeah.
So it's a little cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you land and you go to a debrief.
Yes. And we had two guys on the crew that didn't drink, so we did.
Go figure. And then go to eat.
And then we'd go and get something to eat, yeah. There was nothing. They were supposed to give us food to take with us. And what they gave us was this English high fructose candy. And they were just little, I don't know what they call them. And you're supposed to suck on them. They weren't very filling. So most of the time you threw them away.
Okay, the end of the war came.
And thank goodness.
You want to talk about what you did then? How did you celebrate?
Oh, a lot of the guys went down. I wouldn't do that. They went down to the airplanes and picked up the flare guns and a bunch of the flares.
Oh.
it was like the 4th of July all over the place. So that was real interesting.
So,
And then shooting our 45s off too, you got that, too.
anything to make noise.
Anything to make noise.
How long was it after the war was over before you came back?
It was only a couple of weeks, about 3 weeks, I think. So it wasn't long, and we flew back.
You mentioned that at the end of the war, a lot of the records disappeared.
Yeah, that's the problem. They never did the end flights and that thing. They didn't have very good records of it. And you could go down to the photo shop, pick up any of the photos that you wanted. But who's going to carry all that around?
So you're headed back, you can go back by ship?
No, we flew back. We flew into ice. In fact, it took us longer to fly back than it did to take the Aquitania over, mostly because of weather. We landed in Iceland and we were stuck there for a few days. And then we went over to Newfoundland.
Your crew chief came back with you?
Yeah, the crew chief came back. He was going to fly back with us. So the first thing he did was pull all 4 engines and repair them. He wasn't going to take a chance.
To Berlin and back is okay, but not going home.
Yeah.
You got back, dropped the plane off in Maryland.
In Rhode Island.
Oh, Rhode Island, okay.
Yep,
That was the last you saw of it.
that's the last time we saw it.
You went where?
And then I went to Fort Snelling. They sent me to Fort Snelling, and then from Fort Snelling they gave me a 2-week furlough. So I lived at home for a couple of weeks. And I went back to Fort Snelling, and I decided I wanted to get a milkshake. And I walked into the ice cream bar there, and it was crowded. There was about 3 deep there. And here I am with all the stars and stripes and the ribbons and the wings and everything. And these guys that just got inducted turned around and looked at what I parted. I walked up, got my milkshake, and walked up. Yeah. So it was interesting.
Then you were assigned to occupied Japan territory.
Well, yeah. They put up a list every day on what's going to happen to you. And so with me, they listed it as OJT, Occupation Japanese Territory. But it wasn't, it was on-the-job training. So,
And then you
thank goodness. They asked me what I wanted to do. I told them I wanted to drive a truck. So they gave it to me. I drove a double tanker in Albuquerque and refueling B-29s. So that was interesting. It was fun.
But you didn't like that either.
No, so I started, that took too long, so I changed and drove the oil truck. So then in a few minutes you could pump enough oil in it.
So that was about 4 months.
Yes.
One of the things you mentioned there you like to do was roller skate.
Oh yeah, we did a lot of roller skating. That was great.
I have a name from the past.
Yeah.
Audrey Newman.
Hey! Her mother used to bring her in the car. When they were done roller skating, she'd say, "Here, Dick, take the car and take me home." So then we'd go and have something to eat, and I could drive the car.
And you were there then that you got word that you were no longer needed?
Yeah. And they shipped me back to Sioux Falls, and I was discharged from Sioux Falls.
This is a little Google shopping that I found out about the aircraft itself, McGuire's Chop House. It ended up going back to Kingman, Arizona. You can see it was delivered, they do the day and then the month. So it was delivered 10/1/45 and assigned to the 750 Bomb Squadron in February 2nd of 45. When it went to Kingman, this is where it got parked. Kingman, if you remember, was also where Dad went to gunnery school, so it sort of had a little connection there. All those planes were melted in 3 years. So
They were selling them for the fuel that was in them. The guys are buying them just for the fuel. And I think around $1,000 or whatever, you could buy a 17.
Wow.
Wouldn't that be something to have those today? They're worth what, over $1 million?
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing.
So we're open for questions. That's sort of the end of the story.
Go ahead.
Was your brother on the Schweinfurt raid, October 6th, or?
No.
Okay.
Where in the heck was he shot down? Dessau. He was shot down in Dessau.
Okay.
I haven't gone through his stuff yet.
Yeah, that's what it was. So, yeah.
One question I always had was, what did you do with all of your gear when you left? Certainly you brought your 45 home, your uniform.
When I was going home, all I wanted was out. So you threw everything in the pile, and that was it.
Any other questions? We ran a little bit long here.
Yes.
How long did it take to adjust to living in?
To what?
How long did it take to adjust living in England?
Adjust to living in England.
You adjusted pretty quick. You had to.
Yeah.
So,
He did take a couple trips into London.
oh yeah, we were into London a couple of times.
He mentioned that it was pretty much back to normal.
Yeah. It was okay. We could hear the buzz bombs going over. A couple of them hit London while we were there. What else?
Did you ever need to fire your guns in anger?
Did I? Yeah. Every time I saw one of them Germans.
Yeah, you did see some.
You fired them when you took off, make sure they were working.
Oh, yeah. You don't care how far out he is. You fire and you hope it scares him a little bit.
Is that the 262s? Jet? Is that the jets?
The Jets, yeah.
Yeah, he said he didn't shoot at the jets because he didn't want to antagonize them.
How do you keep yourself from shooting the wing?
How do you keep yourself from not shooting the wing?
Boy, you better not. You know you run down if you do. No, you were pretty careful about that. The wing and the tail and the whole works.
The turrets had
The
like a
turrets
cam on it.
had a profile cam that you couldn't shoot it. It would quit. So you wouldn't shoot from the, it was only the handheld that you had a problem with.
Did you ever man any other positions?
But
Did you ever do any other place on the aircraft other than the waist gun?
oh, I flew up in the cockpit a couple times. Not on a mission, but just when we were goofing around. I flew as engineer twice. So,
People back home good about sending you letters?
Letters from home?
oh yeah, they come through pretty good. We didn't have much problem.
I have at home, my grandmother saved everything.
Yep, she saved every letter.
She saved newspaper clippings, anything to do with the war. And I have all of the letters that I haven't gone through. But you told me that there's a common theme in all those letters.
Yeah, most of the time I'm asking for money.
So I could see no reason to read them. I'm currently in the same boat. It's too close to home. More questions?
Did they give you time off? Like, when you completed one mission, would you get 2 days off before you went again, or? how often
Not
did you fly?
necessarily, but they did let you have time off, yeah.
Back up here.
We did, that's when we went into London or wherever.
This is for the 457th, all the missions that they flew, there was 237,
Somewhere there.
something like that. And then when Dad was there, I circled all the dates that he flew. So starting here in February, there were 3 in a row, then he skipped a day, and then another one, another 2, and then he skipped a few days. So that gives you an idea of how much he flew. Now, I counted 17 today.
Yeah.
You claimed 15.
Records were bad.
Records are bad.
They were screwed up.
I can't be for sure.
They had the crew flying without me one time, and that never happened.
And then another time it was KAMAN.
Yeah.
And then you do a search, for his name, and it doesn't come up. So. And then you had 2 of them that didn't count.
Yeah.
Got to the bombing area and you couldn't see the ground, and so they didn't drop the bombs. You come back, it doesn't even come up as a mission number. It's just a sightseeing trip.
Yeah, that's about it. Get all shot up and no credit. So,
When you'd have a bombing run like that, would you actually bring your bombs back to base?
oh yeah.
So you didn't
That's
just...
what we told the Pope, how to drop them in the channel, we don't want them. But no, he had to bring them back.
Okay.
So, but they were pretty safe. Put the pins back, and they call it the safety pins, and you can't, they wouldn't go off. We had one crew take off, and the bombardier had pulled the pins before takeoff because he didn't want to go back in the bomb bay and stretch around and reaching them. So yeah, he won't do that again because the airplane went in and blew. All those bombs went off, and there was just pieces left all over the place.
On that note, I want to thank everybody for coming. Check the website, Facebook, see what other activities we have going on that you might be interested in.
And how about our expo?
Oh yeah, Air Expo coming up July 14th and 15th. Check the website for that also. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.